All right. So, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I'm Jay Carpenter, the founder of Desert Blockchain, and this is the prototype of Desert Blockchain camps. And we will get to the lighting and the sound and all that stuff, but these frames are designed to accommodate lighting and make sure that the video, the live streaming, and everything is optimized. So anyway, tonight we're going to be talking about innovation in Arizona and basically about what's possible. And we're going to be talking about a little bit about the possibility of camps. We're going to be talking about some of the things that are going on in Arizona in terms of innovation. And then at the end, we're going to try something new, which I'm going to call Corner of Code, where we'll take 10 minutes at the end from 8:20 to 8:30, and I'm going to show a little bit of working code and the code underneath it. Specifically, it's going to be something called libp2p, which I'm really excited about, which I think is a whole new realm of networking and so forth. So anyway, does anybody have any questions? Anything in particular you'd like to get out of tonight before we get started? All right. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of a new program, and I'd like to mention this up front so that people that are watching the video will understand what it is. It's called Citizen Passport Program. And basically the way it works, and it's not totally set up yet, it's kind of be done by hand, but there's all kinds of events that happen throughout the Valley and the tech community. A lot of people come to me and they say, hey Jay, would you mention our event and whatever. So Citizen Passport is a way for you to nominate an event that you would like to go to, where if you nominate the event and you get basically 4 more citizens to nominate the event as well, you are in line to get a free pass, basically a complimentary pass. So for instance, last week, and this kind of fits into our theme tonight, there was the Arizona Tech Innovation Summit, and it was an $85 ticket. 2 citizens were drawn using blockchain information, and they attended basically for free, complimentary.
And had lunch with Mark Cuban.
And had lunch with Mark Cuban. They're best friends now. I think they're on each other's Christmas card lists, so it's amazing. But so this is kind of an expansion of that. So if there's an event that's coming up and you would like to attend, maybe get a complimentary pass, I will be introducing a way for you to nominate that event, and then if 4 other citizens say, yeah, I'd like to go, then 1 other citizen could get a complimentary pass, and then 3 others can get like 50% off. If the organizer says, yeah, we want to do that. So that's...
What, is there a particular application you're using to nominate other people?
That's going to be rolled out. I'm going to just use like Google Forms and Google Calendar for starters. I'm going to use this as kind of like my Golang project to build something that actually works. So it's in the making, but I just wanted to mention it because it's an opportunity for everybody in the Desert Blockchain community to highlight particular events that you'd like to go to and hopefully get some complimentary passes. So any other questions about that? All right, so last week was the Arizona Tech Innovation Summit. I thought it was an awesome event. We had Mark Cuban, we had Doug Ducey, our governor there, and we had,
Congressman Greg Stanton. Senator Kirsten
Sinema. And then, what was it? Is it Innovate or what?
Yeah.
So there's a movement underway to actually bring some sizable money into the
Greyhawk Venture Partners.
Yeah.
Well, one of the funds. But
yeah, Greyhawk Venture Partners, Teal Capital, the host, the moderator of the day, a fellow named Jack Selby, is, I think, the managing partner of Teal Capital, which I believe is the largest holder of Bitcoin in the world. And Peter Thiel, if you don't know who he is, he was the co-founder of PayPal and has numerous other incredible successes, including he was the one who organized the gathering of the A-list of the tech leaders in Trump Tower, which included all the key names. So anyway, we're fortunate to have that opportunity in Arizona. And part of what we're going to be talking about tonight is, what would it really look like to create Arizona as a global technical and innovation hub? Maybe not technical hub, but innovation hub. And so we're fortunate to have Mark Goldstein here today, who's with the AZ Tech Council and has a presentation on where does Arizona stand as an innovation hub. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and basically what exists today.
Let's see.
Yeah, you can just sit it.
Sure. Up the screen. So I actually gave a slightly shorter version of this at an energy blockchain conference over at ASU Law today. So I had to work hard because I didn't have any of this content together offhand, or very little of it. I have been presenting a lot on the Internet of Things now for many years. Last year I presented a lot on autonomous vehicles, and you can actually find all those decks, including this deck, on my SlideShare landing page. A lot of stuff, IoT, autonomous vehicles, emerging computer, cool stuff, and whatever I end up presenting on during the years. So I have been involved in Arizona technology policy since I went independent. I had an engineering career for 18 years, engineering management. But in 1992, 27 years ago, went out on my own. And at that point, I got involved in the Arizona technology ecosystem in a bit more outward way. When I was an engineering manager, I wasn't involved in outside activities necessarily. But so back in the early 90s, Arizona had engaged Stanford Research Institute, SRI, fairly well-known think tank, to put us on a path of cluster-based economic development. This is a concept someone called Michael Porter, a big business thinker, had promulgated in various places. So Arizona got the bug. The governor formed the Governor's Strategic Partnership for Economic Development. There were industry clusters in software and optics and agriculture and all sorts of things. And a cluster is an industry group of stuff you export, right? Not that you consume at home. But an infrastructure foundation is underlying support for your ecosystem. So I was very involved in telecom or broadband. That was an infrastructure foundation, still exists today. Human resources, transportation, energy. These weren't industries per se, because we weren't exporting the products of those. They were the underlying soil and fertilizer in which an economic development community and these clusters could grow. So just that's a bit of background on that. When we talk about an innovation economy or an innovation hub, things have to come together. I mean, we're not San Francisco, you know, we're not New York with the financial industry strength. We have our own strengths and weaknesses, and you have to play to what that hand. But you can do better or worse depending on whether your policies are good or bad policies or no policies. There are many places where they just let things grow organically as they will, and the government, the state government, may not be particularly nurturing. They may just be trying to attract businesses. Business attraction's a common function of state and municipal government, but they may not be advancing the ball in ways that make specific kinds of industries grow in their community. So I'm going to talk about some things Arizona's done to do good policy in that cluster-based model. You know, why we have a good biotech industry in Arizona, why the data center industry is vibrant here, and certain other ones. So I'm going to go through some of those, and towards the end of those, talk about both autonomous vehicles and FinTech, financial technology, essentially blockchain-based things, which are the more current iterations of it. So next slide.
But
Yeah,
Mark,
go ahead.
Mark, before you go on,
Sure.
would you kind of give people an overview of the Arizona Tech Council?
Well, there's a slide for that.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I think
You're ahead of me.
I think it's about 3 slides from now. So, next slide is it actually has the PDF display cutting off the bottom line, which said and that's fine, don't worry about that. But that's the one about the energy blockchain that I was talking about today, would be the bottom one. So we'll cut off.
And this deck is, we're looking at it on SlideShare. You can view or download the PDF of this, not the PowerPoint. Those would be, I don't give them out as readily, but if you think you have a need for a raw PowerPoint, just ask me. And my contact info is on the first and last slide. So next one. Little bit of industry data and statistics. Tech Council did a study last year, 168,000 jobs, either in technology or directly created by their adjacency to technology. Phoenix happened to move up 20 spots last year in the Milken study of best cities for a variety of reasons discussed there. Next slide, though, I'm not going to focus on that. So, Arizona Commerce Authority used to be a department of state government, the Arizona Department of Commerce. I think about 12 years ago, it broke loose and became a kind of public private partnership separate from the government itself. So they do a lot of stuff like the business attraction I talked about, or, you know, trying to get international trade going, trying to do all sorts of things. You know, Canada-Mexico corridor, big trade partners and transportation corridors. They're involved in all of that. I'm just highlighting here a few things. 10 big ideas that they think are things that will be important or are already important in Arizona. And then some of their programs. So with the Tech Council, which will be the next slide, I've worked on helping enable these through the legislature and other processes over the years. But there's an angel investment tax credit. So if you invest in an Arizona startup that has applied and been qualified, and that's not too hard to do at the Commerce Authority, people who invest money in your company get a 30 to 35% Arizona tax credit. So if I gave you $10,000 for your company, you were qualified under this program, it would be at least 30% back, $3,000 on my Arizona tax filing for the next year. The variation is if things are in biotech or they're in rural Arizona, they get the extra 5%, so they go to 35%. And the next is the refundable R&D tax credit. So If your company is doing new R&D in Arizona, you can get money back on your Arizona tax liabilities. The next one is really cool. 2,000 companies have applied in the last 8 years for $250,000 grants. And Commerce Authority has generally given out 12 of those a year. So this is, in the venture community, what you would call non-diluting capital. Someone's giving you money and they don't expect anything in return. They don't take a piece of your company. You can use it. You know, you're going through a competition. What are the good ideas? What are going to create jobs in Arizona? All sorts of criteria. But in the end, 12 companies are getting $250,000 each every year. And it does two things. One, it helps those companies, but it helps the companies who apply because they have to get their crap together to apply. And it's like having to go through a venture capital process. Many of them haven't been, but the process of applying makes them put together coherently their vision and their, you know, strategy and their story. My wife's a storyteller. Their story is important. Every business has a story.
Are these grants within these 10 categories of beer, or are they others as well?
In categories?
Yeah, these 10 categories at the top?
No, they're not. They're not limited in any way by those categories.
Is there any kind of audit to follow up to make sure that the funds were deployed?
Not appropriately audit. There's reporting they ask you about your progress, but it's not a kind of legal audit or possible challenge. They do expect to keep in contact with you, learn how, you know, some have failed, but they also, I don't have the number, but out of the 18.5 million they've given to these 80 companies, quite a number of them have gone on to get venture capital or to grow, and they have statistics and they want to know about all those things.
So if Jay gets his 250K and walks out to the casino and puts it on 13 black,
Do you have legal liability for that? I don't actually know. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, I thought that the innovation challenge, I thought it was kind of more reward, like you.
Well, you have to have shown some progress.
You have to show progress.
You can't just be the idea stage.
Yeah.
You actually have to, you know, have activity and developmental stuff. It's not just, you can't just send an idea in and say, if you give me money, here's what I do. You do have to be active already in some manner.
And on azcommerce.com, the criteria for applying for this?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the cycles and, you know, for when it happens, that one happens twice a year. And so it's an exciting process. If you miss, you know, one cycle, you get ready for the next one instead. And then there's a great conference this time of year. It was only a couple of weeks ago, called Invest Southwest, and they organize it like March Madness. They do, you know, 120 companies apply. Usually they winnow that down to 64, and then they do the kind of March Madness bracketing, you know, and down to the conference where they may have the last 16 go head to head for a day or two. And then there's often significant prizes and services and sometimes money, meaning you may get $20,000 in legal services donated by a specific firm or other things. And there's also capital investment on the table. There's investors in the room, and there's investment capital, sometimes part of the prize. That is all subject to coming to terms with the investors. So that's not non-diluting capital. That's a real venture investment. So the services are non-diluting. They're free to you, but the capital has a cost, you know, a term sheet that has to come into existence if you're not doing that. So those are the important ones. The bottom is a trade expansion program where they help you accelerate your exporting to other states or countries. Next slide. So the Arizona Technology Council, I started on their board in 1995. I still am on the board and executive committee as an emeritus member, but I'm very tightly involved with them. 850 Arizona technology companies now, and it's a real powerhouse for educational programs, lobbying, and networking opportunities. I'm going to mostly talking about the lobbying here. So there's an annual public policy guide that you can download, and the next slide I'll show you is a table of, not yet, is a table of contents for that policy guide and all the issues we try to reflect and impact at a state and federal level. At the federal level, we participate with a company called, or a group called CompTIA, and they do a lot of technology certifications, national organization, and many tech councils. So we get a lot of our federal policy from CompTIA, except they don't yet have their own artificial intelligence or financial technology federal policies. So I write those, most of the rest of it's from them. But I did want to highlight the Arizona Tech Council's foundation, which has recently been named from the SciTech Festival, Arizona SciTech Festival, to be the SciTech Institute. And that's in part because some of the programs they've invented here have gone national and have broader scope. So the two things are, we're currently in the February through April window where the SciTech Festival happens with thousands of events. They don't produce them all, but they align with them. And they're all over the state, every county, every city. They had a big one in February that kicks it off called Connect to STEM at the biomedical campus on the old Phoenix Union High School, 6th Street in Van Buren. And it's great. They touch hundreds of thousands of people, some of them more than once to get to those numbers. But for example, the universities will have open door nights where you can go and tour labs and people are there to tell you about things.
Who's been to the SciTech Festival?
Anyone been to events they know to have been that? So forth.
It's really cool. They have some awesome.
And they invented here in Arizona a chief science officer program, or high school to a lesser extent grade school, but in high school, just like you would elect a class president or a class secretary, you elect a class chief science officer. And they participate in educational development within your campus. And I don't know if there's a homeschooling option for chief science officers, but it's really cool because the kids really develop, they become ambassadors of SciTech, and you hear them speak. They come and speak to adult groups, and they get over their fears, and they have really good presentation skills, and they're doing good stuff in SciTech. And it's a great program. And now, and they got to bring like 6 of the Arizona CSOs to Obama's White House and meet with the national chief technology officer. And this program has done so well here that it's been replicated in, I think, about 10 other states. And so that's part of how they reformed as the SciTech Institute rather than an Arizona center. So next, please. So this is the index to the public policy guide. For today, when I was talking at an energy consortium, the energy and FinTech were the more important categories, but I talked about innovation. In general, so next, let's see what's next. Other important players in that arena. Now, most of these state and city groups work on good business policy, to some extent technology. You know, the Tech Council, we kind of dominate the technology policy, but they come along with it. But for example, the Greater Phoenix Chamber has formed under their foundation AZ Cyber Talent, which is a big workforce development group. There's like 60 people on it. Frank Rimmelman helps lead that. Yo-Yo's involved, a number of people we know. And at any given time, they will say that there's about 2,000 open positions in Arizona in cybersecurity. And so they bring together the educators, the employers, and all sorts of other people to try to make sure that the educators have the curriculum that will churn out the employees with the skills that are desired by the people in industry. So that's just an example of a great effort there. I'm very involved, and I formally chair the Arizona Telecom and Information Council. We work on broadband, especially for rural areas where there's often less broadband than there should be. And the application space for broadband, telehealth, e-learning, all sorts of things associated. So it's not just the availability of the broadband, but how you would use it. Next. So Arizona generally rates extremely low, 47th, 48th, 49th in the amount of funding given to K through 12 by the state. And that money is generally called M&O, maintenance and operations money. So you rank it by how much per student. I think it's probably $3,500 or $4,000 a student. We're very low on that. And K through 12 education in Arizona is one of our weak points potentially when companies think about transferring staff here or siting here. But we, as many other states, have workarounds. So there's what's called Prop 301, which is a 0.5 cent sales tax that we all pay at retail, and that was just extended 20 years. It was about to expire. That money goes to education. So they appropriate so much, and then they have to kind of backfill as best they can. Then they owed a lot of money based on formulas for inflation and student counts, and they finessed money acquired by the state land department from selling trust land and accelerated the payouts from that to the K through 12 system to make up the several $100 million that they owed. Essentially, the state owed the schools that money. But then recently, just last year, they approved at the legislature a 20% increase over 3 years in teacher salaries. Some may go to administrators or staff, but the teachers, and they track it whether districts are actually granting it because they don't control the teacher salaries. But generally that metric is being met or exceeded. So teachers are getting a significant raise. We had Red for Ed, right? We had basically a teacher strike here. And one of the outcomes of that was in fact this pay. So over 500 charter schools here, most of any state. There's like 35% of the schools in Arizona are charter schools, and no other state even comes close. It's not for me to say whether that's good or that's bad. I think it's both. But in the annual rankings of the best high schools in America, I think we had like 3 of the top 10, 2 basis charter schools and 1 other charter school in Arizona were ranked 3 of the top 10 high schools in America. So some are very good, some are perhaps not as good. Next. So biotech is a great story here. 16 years ago, the Flint Foundation funded Battelle, a big international group, to do a bioscience roadmap. And this is where you see what I would say and was saying earlier today is that success is often a matter of focus. Like here, a roadmap is a focal point. It's a matter of regulatory reform. It's a matter of a dynamic, growing ecosystem that you nurture. So we had a roadmap, $1 package put together by the city of Phoenix and others to secure 13 acres at the old Phoenix Union High School, which is now a U of A medical school outpost. But behind that, on that campus, is something called TGen, the Transgenomic Institute. And we hired some of the top people who had mapped the human genome for the National Institute of Health to come seed that institute. Dr. Jeffrey and other people that had done the big science came to Arizona. And so now we have a great biotech industry in Arizona. The Arizona Bioindustry Association helps nurture that. They have their own venture conference late in the year, November, December, and at that you see some of the great new ideas in precision medicine or diagnostics or other things that are looking for venture capital. So they help foster that innovation economy. Arizona also has one of the best, if not the best, telemedicine efforts in the world. The event I was at today was attended by Bob Burns, who's the chairman of the Arizona Corporation Commission. But 16 years ago, he was in the Arizona legislature. He funded the U of A for telemedicine. It's been a pet interest of his probably before that and since then. But Arizona, by law now, requires comparable reimbursement for things that are delivered remotely. If I have a psychiatrist session on Zoom or WebEx, insurance companies have to pay that psychiatrist the same amount. We're also part of a multi-state compact where a Colorado physician can deliver services to someone in Arizona and without being licensed here specifically. And so we have really one of the best telemedicine efforts on the planet happening in Arizona, but that's 16 years in the making. Next.
So before we go on to the next slide, if you're not aware, in the genomics realm, blockchain is being looked upon as a key piece to what's next in genomics, TGen, and not necessarily TGen, but just that whole realm.
And also pharmacy, for example, the kind of logistics and supply chain functions. The pharmacy companies are really into blockchain as part of tracking product manufacturing all the way through distribution and use. So blockchain is certainly important.
But in terms of, when you do Ancestry.com or 32andMe or whatever it is.
23. 23.
Well,
yes, aliens may have 32.
I transpose my age all the time to my advantage. But there are some really interesting case studies in terms of identity and control of the data and all that stuff. So.
The gig economy. Now, when I first heard the term, I thought it meant gigabit. I thought gig was speed, but it's gig as in job. So the gig economy, I grew up doing people's lawns and shoveling snow, and that was gig economy. We just didn't have that name for it. But right when Governor Ducey came to his office, there was a Super Bowl, and the Department of Transportation was not allowing Ubers and Lyfts at the airport, right? And he said, well, this is crap. All these people are coming to Phoenix and they have Uber apps and whatever, and they can't be serviced. So one of his very first acts as governor was to issue an executive order that basically said to his own Department of Transportation and law enforcement and everyone, that will not stand. We're going to let that part of the gig economy work everywhere in Arizona. It was followed up by other, and then the problem was that people wanted to treat the Uber and Lyft, the ride-sharing services, like taxi cabs, but that was an onerous burden. The insurance didn't work for people, and Arizona was one of the first states in a group of states to straighten that out, to define rules that were functional for that kind of service. And now there's pending legislation in this session to allow more peer-to-peer car sharing service. So if I want to rent you my car and I have an insurance policy that would allow it, I could do that. And so interesting applications when I think about autonomous vehicles, I want one, but I want mine to go out and be driving when I know I'm not going to need it, picking people up and earning money. You know, I kept thinking why I don't mind. I might still want to own a car even when they're autonomous and on demand, but send that thing to work, get a paper route, go out and do something for me.
And then right now, also in this session,
Is a legislation that will license you automatically with a simple background check for professional licenses if you're licensed in another state. So if you're a cosmetologist, or you're a hair cutter, you're, you know,
Electrician.
I'm sorry?
Electrician or a plumber?
Electrician or plumber, absolutely. Professional licenses that are granted by state boards. If they're, I'm not sure that their licenses are under a specific state board, but all the things that state boards and commissions have control over will be automatically granted to people with a comparable license from another state. So a good right to work kind of thing that I thought fit in the
Is that in progress?
It's legislation before the Arizona legislature.
How wide does that go? Does it go to real estate too?
I don't know for sure. I would think so, because I'm not sure where the certifications are issued.
Certifications are issued at the state level.
Yeah, it may well.
Because when I came here with my California license, here's a direct quote: "We don't care."
Right.
No,
Well, they're
every state.
caring more. I can't tell you, can't answer specifically from real estate, but
No, I can't. It's not gonna.
Okay.
Every state's a little different and
Right.
two different.
data center. There's an enormous amount of data centers here already.
CBRE, a big real estate tracking and management firm, says we're the 5th largest market in the US
After places like Atlanta and New York.
but we're moving up to the 3rd largest just based on the
Accelerated pace of deployment here.
So 900 acres have been bought recently.
Microsoft alone, there were 3 buys in Goodyear. Microsoft was 270 acres, which is going to be 250 megawatt of data center, and probably full of really cool AI chips, not just simple cloud services, right, but really high-end analytic stuff running on some Azure platform.
But Arizona continues to excel in data centers, in no small part to that 4th bullet,
which is state programs that said we like data centers. And someone asked me just the other day, he said, well, aren't there less employees per square foot for data centers? Yes, but their average pay is a lot higher. So the pay per square foot is probably not that different than lower paid occupations, right? So yes, you have a big data center and you have 24 people working 3 shifts to staff the knock and do this stuff. So it's not a lot of gross number employment, but they're at very, very high salary remuneration.
Lots of hiring.
Exactly.
Just a couple more sections.
Autonomous vehicles is a great Arizona story. We've become the primary place in the US to develop and deploy autonomous vehicle services, in no small part to government treatment of those things. There was a time when Uber was bringing down their fleets of test vehicles from the Bay Area to Arizona on, what do you call those trucks that carry automobiles, to the
Car haulers?
Yeah, well, multi, 8 cars on a rack. So anyway, 2015, an executive order enabling, encouraging early autonomous vehicle testing with a backup driver who is usually hands-off. 2018 executive order that allows full, what we would call tier 4. There are 5 tiers of autonomous driving. Tier 5 is you can go off-road, you can go anywhere, and it'll figure it out. You may not have the maps, it may be rough ground, but it can go anywhere. Tier 4 really is that it goes known places, cities, highways, places where the mapping has been done and the infrastructure is supportable.
Mark, I'm not sure you want to use the term off-road when you're talking about vehicles.
Okay.
Just kidding.
I didn't say they'd be flipping over. But,
2 weeks after that order, though, was the first in the world fatality.
Yeah.
Now, this was a Uber test vehicle with a hands-off driver sitting there reading something. There's videos all over. You can see what the car saw. You can see the driver. And Uber stopped testing here, but Waymo, which is Alphabet, Google's autonomous driving division, has not. In fact, Waymo is doing full tier 4, no driver, backup driver stuff in partnership with Valley Metro in Central Phoenix and out in Chandler today. And Waymo, for example, is talking about bringing tens of thousands of autonomous vehicles to do ride-sharing services. Now, Uber and Lyft, that gig economy is not going to do so good for human drivers when the autonomous drivers are, but Uber and Lyft will keep up with it, but there will be a displacement in that gig economy of all the people that are doing Uber and Lyft driving as autonomous vehicles come on.
By the way, there's in the autonomous vehicle realm, there's some really interesting blockchain applications, both in terms of value transmission as well as coordination, as well as distributing energy using cars as like a battery.
Or having insurance that's really calibrated to the actual vehicle use rather than just being a blanket policy.
Do they create a mesh network amongst themselves?
They can.
They will under, and I'll show you where to get to my autonomous vehicle presentations in a second. Yes, there's a standard called V2X, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to infrastructure, for communicating between the vehicles. So if you have a blind spot where you're turning and another vehicle can see there's a pedestrian there, it will let you know. So yes, good question. And the answer is, for this coming class of autonomous vehicles, they are smart in that way. And finally, for this slide, the Commerce Authority has perhaps the first in the world kind of a think tank for autonomous, automated mobility that they've created. Involves the presidents of all 3 of our universities, a bunch of other people from industry, and so on. Ansh from ASU. Next slide. So just a couple of follow-ups. Big New York Times article on Arizona, where self-driving vehicles go to learn, recognizing where we were in 2015. And so that's 2017, but where we were emerging as that place. Next. The governor's executive order in 2018 really unleashing tier 4 autonomy on the streets. Next. So not only do the autonomous vehicles test here and deploy here, there's some really good manufacturing stories here. So many of you are perhaps aware of the Ollie, the locomotor story. This is a great story. They were printing like a sports car, mostly 3D printing it for years. The Ollie's about 80% 3D printed, I think. You can't print the motor, for example, you can't print the tires necessarily, but that shuttle is about 80% printed in enormous 3D printers. They're out in Chandler.
They're in use today?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
They sell them to communities and campuses, though. They only go up to 25 miles an hour. So they're like an enterprise campus, a college or school campus, a community, golf course and
Airports.
Yeah, they're selling and deploying them.
And this particular image
And
does
tell them about the community, the 180,000.
yeah. So Local Motors is very innovative, not only in their 3D printing, they've got these micro factories, but also in their organizational structure. They have like 150,000 person community around the world that contributes to the design of things. And they have contests which we can enter into. It's called Launch Forth, where they put bounties out there for design of different elements of this stuff. And our last Arizona Blockathon, which is like a sister entity to Desert Blockchain, was at their Tempe facility in their warehouse. And so there's an opportunity for us to innovate, with Local Motors, with Launch Forth, and so forth. And I think I'm as excited about their organizational structure as I am about their products, because I think it's really, really cutting edge, and it's totally aligned with the decentralized construct of blockchain and other things that we're interested in.
Thank you.
I knew you could do that.
Oh, and also, this is this image of Ali really doesn't capture what it is. It's described as a server on wheels. So the generation 2 of Ali it's filled with media. So it's interactive and the changes.
And it's uniquely enabled for those with some kind of disability.
Yeah.
Hearing, sight, mobility, all those things have been taken into account in providing mobility as a service, which is a term that I would use in a deeper presentation. And when you order a cab, that's mobility as a service, but there's this whole emerging category that is generally now called MAAS, mobility as a service. So Lucid Motors got, now I don't know if any of you follow Elon Musk and Tesla or his other projects, SpaceX, the Boring Company, a whole bunch of smart kid stuff he's doing.
Flamethrowers.
Flamethrowers, that's right. That was a Boring Company one-off, 500 flamethrowers. And they cost a lot more on eBay now than when you got one of the original ones. But he was trying to take Tesla private, and a Saudi investment fund was going to give him billions of dollars to help him do that. That fell through. They choked on that. But those Saudi billions actually then came to Lucid Motors, which is a competitor luxury electric vehicle being developed, not yet sold. Developed, it will be manufactured in Casa Grande. So they got $1 billion+ investment a few months back. Nikola was started in Utah. They're hiring 2,000 people to work in Coolidge, Arizona, making a hydrogen-fueled truck that will drive autonomously from city to city. There'll be hydrogen depots necessary and logistics, and so they'll drive themselves from the edge of one city to the edge of another. Then local drivers will get in and do pickup and delivery within the market. So I've talked to the CEO, and he says, well, it's much easier on the highway. Sagebrushes may whip in front of you, but there's not a bicyclist or a car door opening in your path all the time. So anyway, fully autonomous highway driving, planning on human drivers for local.
Is it a coincidence that Nikola was Tesla's first name?
Yes. No, it's not a coincidence. No, not at all. And then this company, Too Simple, is based in San Diego, but they manufacture and test in Tucson. And so every day on I-10, there's unmanned Too Simple. Now they're diesel powered, but they are autonomous. So this one slide is to make the point that we're not only getting testing and deployment, we're getting manufacturing as part of that ecosystem. Thanks.
For more, here's my two most recent deep presentations. This one from the Phoenix Mobile and Emerging Tech Festival is about 160 slides, all organized in fairly deep view into some of the underlying technology. You can find it on SlideShare. The deck indicated next to it is much shorter, but focuses much more on flying platforms, drones for delivery, air cabs, and where all that piece is going. So if you have, this is a much deeper deck about autonomy in general, but that one has the coolest flying machine concepts in them. Okay. Okay, finally, FinTech. Jeff Wenninger, who we both know very well, is a state legislator who learned at the feet of David Schweiker, a U.S. congressman who co-founded the U.S. Congressional Blockchain Caucus. We were early in recognizing electronic signatures recorded on blockchain and underlying smart contracts as valid, and we continue to have refinements and improvements to that happen in subsequent sessions. Last year, there was the approval of a financial technology sandbox that would let you ramp up entrepreneurial efforts for a 2-year window, a 3rd year if you're applying for a proper license under a regulatory light regimen. And there are 4 companies currently approved and operating in that FinTech sandbox. There's new legislation this year to streamline that a bit and expand its dominion a bit. It's still not as successful as we'd like to see, but it was still the first in the nation, and it's a good attempt at blockchain in the financial community being liberalized in its use. Now, big national problems with ICOs, coin issuance, and securities issues. This does not deal with those. It restricts certain activities in ways that aren't ICO necessarily ICO friendly, or limit your ICO profile to Arizona. Now, a week ago, where Jay and I were at, the governor, they brought a little table up on stage and he signed a property technology sandbox. So that's not blockchain inherently, but it's going to affect the way houses are listed, the way title work is done, and certainly in things like titles, there's plenty of blockchain opportunity. We've seen Leslie Pico and Proppy and others, Proppy and other ways that property records and title work may incorporate blockchain. So that's one. Back a second, I'm not sure. Municipalities cannot tell you that you can't have a mining rig in your home or business. You know, as long as you have sufficient power for that and aren't setting fires with your e-profiles.
How about HOAs? HOAs limited?
I don't believe they can. Now, they can prohibit some businesses that have heavy traffic, for example, right? I don't think they can prohibit you from working at home. But, so no, I don't think the HOA...
People that go to like the noise levels though? Or
right. Yeah, but you're not going to hear the hum of the computers. Outside the 4 walls, probably. So I don't think so. Okay, and we have a crowdfunding enablement. The SEC has never implemented national crowdfunding rules, and so we are among the number of states who allow for crowdfunding, but it has to be from Arizona investors. It's fundamentally limited in ways like that. You can't take out-of-state money into it, but it's still there and heavy use. So next. So these are the 4 current companies
and the Attorney General's site where you can find the rules and other information about the financial tech sandbox. So the FinTech Sandbox is run by the AG's office. The PropTech is going to be run by Commerce, though, I think. Next. Sure, you can get the whole deck as a PDF. Right now, it's available. But you're welcome. Next. So here are some of the elements in our blockchain. The Greater Phoenix Economic Council has been an active player. Desert Blockchain, along with a few other nonprofit groups. At ASU, Jay and I have been involved in an ongoing series of free lunch forums. There's the third or fourth for this year has just happened. There's one next month. ASU has a blockchain research lab funded by Dash and others. And in the Global Sustainability Lightworks group, they're doing energy trading test bench. Next. So again, very quick, a couple of news hits. National, international news about Arizona. Smart contract clarity. We were the first to really establish that by legislation. And that gets us like companies like Sweetbridge, who you also saw in the FinTech Sandbox, rely on the legal authority that the smart contracts are given. The Attorney General himself proposed the FinTech Sandbox, very unusual in my experience for economic development to be driven by an Attorney General. They're usually about enforcement, right? Not about loosening regulations to the good of the innovation economy. So it's seen well around the world, really, and around the US that we've done this. And so, yes, Arizona gets some cred, some street cred in this arena. Next.
Jay, a month ago or so, you were talking about how Arizona is trying to, but the development staff is woefully inadequate to support all the stuff here.
Yeah, I'm going to address that in my portion.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. You're teeing me up.
Here's a Word document that I maintain. I do share it liberally with those that I think need to see it or ask me to see it. And it's my tally of all the organizations, companies, and individuals in the blockchain and FinTech related community. So I rely on people to tell me what I'm missing. I actively maintain it, and it's not up on the web. You have to ask for it, and that's fine. You have my email. If that's something you want to see, just let me know, and I send out the current copy. Next. Okay, so finally, what today was about was energy blockchain. And the third bullet, my third recommendation of the Corporation Commission, these are all blockchain recommendations. One is that they track corporate records and filings using blockchain technology. One is that they consider trading and issuing securities. But more salient to today was Andy Tobin, one of the commissioners, has opened a docket to examine the use of blockchain in energy trading. So we'll wrap up with a few slides that'll give you a little taste of what that kind of energy opportunity is like.
So is that using their own blockchain?
No, this is an exploratory docket. And so they're seeking experimentation by the utility companies and others. They're welcoming experimentation. They're not defining how that should look. But they're investigating and they're advising and they're gonna enable experimentation.
Could open the door for Willy coin.
You know what? We've been talking about that, right?
Exactly.
So the world is evolving from the old grid, this is the US Department of Energy image, to a two-way grid where you have distributed solar, you have cars that have batteries. I have a Volt with a 16 kilowatt hour battery pack that's, you know, storing energy. Distributed storage, battery farms, all sorts of things, microgrids for campuses and industrial facilities, all become part of a more complicated energy grid than we've ever known before. Next slide. Navigant, who was a presenter today, is a very big and serious advisory firm in the energy space. Here's their concept of that, you know, cloud. We've reached the era, or approaching the era of having an energy cloud. And within the cloud, there needs to be mechanisms for sharing and accommodating the use of electricity in ways we haven't known before, which are likely to be a blockchain enabled. Next. So this is a company, I believe they're just called Energy Blockchain Network, is cut off at the bottom, that talks about peer-to-peer, meaning I want to sell you or grant you power from my solar array. I need APS to carry it to you, but there should be a way that I can do that and let them take their little commission and carrying charge off the top. I should be able to broker my own. Now, this happens today with big players. Apple has an enormous data center in Mesa. They have a solar farm, and they make big deals with APS, right? We're going to generate solar, you're going to absorb it, and in turn, you're going to give us power when we need it, as we need it. So if you're big enough, everyone makes these deals. What we're trying to do here is bring the granularity and the size of the deals down to micro payments. It's easy to do the big deals. They know how to do them, they know how to track them, they know how to bill them, they know how to structure them. The idea here is that I can sell you a penny's worth of electricity, you know, or grant it to you, and there's a way where there's a low friction, low cost mechanism that blockchain excels at to track and transact those kinds of things. Next. I think this is the last slide. It's a great slide about, Gardner does these hype cycles, and this is all about blockchain business. And what I highlighted in red are the two ones directly related to energy blockchain in utilities and oil and gas, and in purple, some things I thought are contributing infrastructure or enablement, and where they are on the business hype cycle. Next is probably okay. This is an ecosystem map of how they see different kinds of companies clustering in what they're offering within the energy blockchain space. Not easy to read, but it's easier to read what the sectors are anyway, and kind of get a feel for where they think the industry will structure next. Should be the last. Same as the first, so you have that, you get the link to get this and my other stuff. And glad to take any more comments and questions before Matt J takes over.
So for the energy infrastructure and sharing, do you think that'll more spur development of new blockchain projects, or do you think that'll work with some of the existing players like PowerLender?
I think there's going to be a little Cambrian era, a little explosion of new stuff before it settles down. Experimentation, there'll be different platform plays. That's probably one of them. No, but no, I see the rise of this group that I presented to today, the Energy Blockchain Consortium, is trying to establish standards that don't yet exist, and that platform undoubtedly doesn't yet meet because the standards and protocols and expectations don't even exist. And then they have 50 possible use cases for energy that they've defined, and they're going through trying to say if I own an electric vehicle and I actually want to broker power back from my car, how do I manage that? How do I tell my car when I think I'll be driving next and how much of the stored power it can broker back onto the grid and at what price. And, you know, there's a whole marketplace. So it's not just saying, I have power, you take it. There's a very complex management algorithm or marketplace with very complex factors. So if I want to say, well, I'm going to use my car at 3 tomorrow, I want there to be at least enough power left for 20 miles of driving. Let some algorithm manage optimizing cost recovery for the other miles on my battery and all that kind of stuff. And that's only one use case. As I say, they've defined 50 use cases so far.
Well, thank you, Mark. That's really,
My
really
pleasure.
cool stuff.
Great to do this.
All right. So
There's a lot going on.
there is a lot going on in Arizona, and you know, I think we've got some enormous potential here because of the vision that our policymakers have and the actions that they're taking. And Mark went through some of the funding mechanisms and so forth, but you know, Willie, you touched upon the gap, in my view, is the technical talent.
How are all these companies going to grow if they don't do that?
Well, you can see in cyber, there's a specific effort to provide that one. So there may need to be specific efforts in other arenas.
Well, so the question I would pose to everybody is, how did Nashville, Tennessee become a country music capital of the world? How did that happen? Because I assert that it was probably because they set up a stage. In 1925, they set up the Grand Ole Opry. And the Grand Ole Opry was an hour-long dance hall show that they happened to broadcast on radio. That stage was the spark of a whole ecosystem of collaboration, innovation in music, and musical talent coming out of there. Now, what does that have to do with technology? I've been in the tech space for a long time. I participate in hackathons. I help sponsor hackathons. The parallels between musical talent and software coding technical talent are very strong, in my opinion. It's part technique, it's part artistry, and it's a lot of practice. And my view, you know, when I see a developer, it's kind of like seeing a musician play the first few notes of whatever they're playing. At least for me, I can pretty well tell how accomplished that musician is within a few bars of whatever they play. And I don't know what it is, but there's something similar with software developers. So the question is, could Phoenix compete as Nashville competed with Hollywood? Could Phoenix compete with Silicon Valley? Not head on, but what would it take to create this sort of ecosystem where software developer talent can be sort of incubated and fostered and have a chance to grow? And I assert that it's creating some sort of stage. And the stage is some sort of physical space where the talent can come together and sort of riff together. But it's also a pathway from that riffing, that collaboration, into how do we move it into something that's going to go to prototype and then into, you know, production. So the parallel is something called jamming, just like a jazz musician. And this fellow, and I read his book a long time ago, is an expert in innovation. So I'm going to play a little clip that was recorded at Davos, I think is how you pronounce it, where he talks about some of the elements of innovation. And this is pretty short, 4 minutes. And I apologize for the sound quality.
Leaders feel that if they tell people it's important and encourage them and create a culture of innovation, that they will get innovation. But it's not true.
Here was somebody who's called by the economists Mr. Creativity and calls himself an innovation activist. What is your focus?
My focus right now is trying to get innovation to be a global agenda, to define and drive a global agenda for innovation. So right now there are many countries, many regions, many cities that are focusing on trying to be more innovation driven. They're looking for the sources of economic growth, but there's a lot of unclarity as to what innovation is, how to practice it. And my job, therefore, is to try to define it and then to try to bring a community of innovation leaders together to actually do useful things.
I read a very good definition of you of innovation. Can you give me a summary of that?
Sure. So innovation to me is about a set of capabilities that allows for the realization of a desired future. That's my definition. Now, there are a couple of important points about that. One is its capabilities. Many leaders feel that if they tell people it's important and encourage them and create a culture of innovation, that they will get innovation. But it's not true. And to me, innovation is like practicing the piano. You know, you can't just decide to give a jazz concert tomorrow. If you've never played the piano before, you have to practice, you have to learn the theory, the traditions, etc. And similarly, in organizations and also in societies, you have to put in the work. You have to do the work of developing the muscles in order to be able to get this kind of work done. The other point is innovation to me always has to be about something. It has to be about satisfying a purpose that engages people and engages their emotions and makes them want to change their behavior. So just simply say that you want innovation because you want to be rich or you want to have a certain kind of economic growth, while it may be important, is not necessarily what is going to get people to want to get out of bed earlier in the morning to work harder or change their behavior. So leadership of innovation is about setting a level of aspiration and defining that purpose in a way that causes that change.
Everybody, companies, and all the governments strive for innovation. What do you see the greatest lacks here?
The greatest lacks, you mean in terms of the company's abilities to practice innovation? Well, there are many problems that companies run into. One is an unclear definition of innovation. If you don't have a clear definition of innovation, you can't do it. Not having a purpose that really inspires people. Not giving people the freedom to pursue innovation and to define an agenda, not providing the resources that fuels the innovation effort, not making the tools available to accomplish these innovation goals, not integrating innovation with the CEO's thought process or the strategy processes of the company, and many others. I mean, there are dozens of fatal flaws, both for companies and for countries, that would prevent them from achieving their innovation goal.
And your personal goal, like in regards to innovation, what would be your dream to reach?
Well, I mean, I'm a personal path of exploration as well, which is I've been a pianist since the age of 5. I decided a few years ago that I would use this period of my life to improve my skills at jazz piano. Partly because I wrote a book about 15 years ago that was essentially what can leaders learn from jazz musicians. And jazz is a great metaphor for the innovation process, because you have to learn how to do it. It is about creating things that people have to find beautiful, and so it satisfies many of the aspects of the definition that I shared with you.
So he has some other videos that I'd highly recommend, and hopefully that gives you a sense of how this thing, everybody wants this innovation thing, but the chemistry, the artistic side of it, I think is way underrated and not really appreciated. And what I'd most like to throw out to everybody that's here tonight and and the continuation of this community and these events and so forth is, what's the real purpose? What would really make us, give us, as he said, something to wake up in the morning and get excited about? I mean, for me, it's this movement to peer-to-peer. It's us having control of our data. It's us having control of our health records, having control of our, money, our value, all these things that's happening around the world. I mean, that's what excites me. So let's see, let's go back to present. And that's the book that he wrote, and I think it's John Cale. And he taught at Harvard, by the way. Incredible credentials. Here's a little summary of the Grand Ole Opry, which talks about what a centerpiece that became for Nashville. And the question is, what's possible with this? Does a blockchain campus? Could this be a collaborative innovation stage where we come together and basically jam? So that's pretty much it. This is posted, and you can take a look at it. I'm going to go over a little bit of code, but does anybody have like one or two comments before we switch over to the codes section? Yeah.
I think it's interesting how there's like a pretty big Ethereum community in Berlin, where there's I think a lot of the community did start to grow from Berlin outwards.
Right.
And I'm interested to understand more why that was. I think that might have a lot to do with like the culture of Berlin in general, and Berlin's kind of like free-spirited culture might have something to do with it.
Yep, in Germany?
Yeah, in Germany.
Well, so interesting that you mentioned that, Skylar, because I don't know if you know the history of Ethereum, but what happened was there's a guy named Joe Lubin who basically had the foresight, and there were a few others, but there was basically, Ethereum started in Toronto, of all places. And I think they rented a house there or something, and people just kind of came and they riffed, exactly like that video, where they just sort of collaborated, serendipitous things happened. It became like a magnet for additional people with that vision, with that drive to create something new, and it just exploded from there. But it started in Toronto. And in my view, there's every possibility that we could do the same thing here for whatever is next with decentralization, blockchain, and so forth. So Berlin is certainly a key place, Switzerland, San Francisco, New York, Singapore. This is a global phenomenon. If you can send a text message, you can participate in this new decentralized realm. There's like 5 billion, 6 billion people with at least the ability to text message.
Decentralized, but it seems to have these hubs.
Yeah.
And those hubs are a result of what? A collaboration of talent?
Talent, probably.
Yeah, well, it's talent, it's also opportunity, because a guy like Joe Lubin actually funded the basic infrastructure to get the thing going, as well as some other, pardon me?
What infrastructure?
Well, rent a house.
Well, yeah, but that's just a house. How's it?
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't take much.
Or a warehouse.
Or a warehouse. I mean, I've funded this whole thing myself out of my pocket, other than the citizen contributions, so that's what the opportunity is here, is to come together and just riff, basically. Create like a jam session here for the technology.
Do we have our theme song be, we be jamming?
That's for you to write. I'm not touching that.
Oh, it's already out there. The song's already out there.
So anyway,
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for being here tonight. Because you being here is part of the opportunity set for all this to come together. So we're going to switch real quick into corner of code. It's the code corner. And what I want to show you is a peer-to-peer decentralized chat platform. This is using libp2p, which is a Protocol Labs construct. And you may not be wowed by exactly what's transmitted here, but the cool thing about this, there's a few dimensions. First of all, there is no central server. So most of the things when we communicate is going from a client to a server and then out to another client, which is not decentralized. This is purely peer-to-peer. Okay? The other cool thing is this is a set of networking tools that does not need the internet. You can actually, that's right. If you can make any kind of connection, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, I think it even would work with audio signals. This will work.
Like radio bandwidth type thing?
Yep, all that. Wow. You don't need TCP/IP for this to work. And this creates a peer-to-peer networking structure that simplifies the really, really tough interoperability issues around protocols, around networks, all that stuff. So I'm going to just show you a quick little demo. This is being run on Raspberry Pis, which are basically $35. And if you're not familiar with a Raspberry Pi, this little box is a Raspberry Pi. And I've got another one that's out of the box.
But if it's not using the internet, it's got to have some way to transmit, some way to receive, right?
Well,
That's what that is?
if you can make some sort of signal connection, and it doesn't have to be the internet. So in other words, part of the beauty of this is you get this Raspberry Pi basically talking to this Raspberry Pi a span of like 2 feet, okay? Without something like this, you know what happens? This Raspberry Pi probably has to go to Reston, Virginia, and send it back to this Raspberry Pi, which is 2 feet away, in order for those two things to talk. That's crazy. So this is, in my view, really, really powerful. And what I'm going to do
Are you
is
envisioning some bigger Raspberry Pis?
no, I don't. That's the beauty of it. You don't need something big. You can have more Raspberry Pis.
Create a mesh network.
A mesh network, exactly. Okay.
So it's somewhere like Cuba, they'll actually have, instead of having regular networks, you can have like Ethernet cables and such.
Yes.
There's like a, it's called like something box. You can buy like sequences stuff. I think there's using Bluetooth, so they'll send files short distances.
So we're going to type in a little message. There you go. Shows up.
Is there any kind of confirmation you get back to show that the message was received? Because
I don't think it shows up on this particular. I don't know. That's not the bottom line question.
How would you know your message was actually received?
Well, you could run another Pi you're kind of watching, so you could have a bunch of these things. If one gets it, then probably all of them. I don't know. Good question for sure.
Is it encrypted or is it just like?
It can be encrypted.
Okay.
So it does have an.
It's not like most radios where it's just kind of sending out a signal.
No, it's not clear. Oops.
How do you direct it to this particular Raspberry Pi, not the one around the corner, but it's a new house?
So I set this up in advance, and I put in an IP that's so that they're listening to each other. But the beauty is that you can use this funky hash as your addressing scheme. That's why you don't need the TCP/IP. Now I'm not quite far enough along, so I'll show you the code. This is in Golang, by the way. So bingo, that gets broadcast out all over the place.
What's the range on these Pis?
Well, they've got built-in Bluetooth and Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so Bluetooth, 10 meters, and Wi-Fi about 100 meters.
Yeah, another cool dimension of the Raspberry Pis is you can start to attach all sorts of Arduinos and other devices, Aura chips, and whatever line of sight and stuff.
You can go on
it's crazy.
Like FinTech, where you just buy like fairly long-range adapters. Just,
Sure.
Just plug in like USBs and type of stuff.
Sure. So,
What type of connection are you using right now?
right now we are using Wi-Fi because it's going over this little router, this little Wi-Fi router.
So it is through the router?
It's tied to the IP address of the router. So anyway, we're at the end of the time. I just wanted to show you this. I'll be happy to open up the code if you want to see the Golang code for it. But this is part of the tool set that we can play around with in here and start to connect devices, start to network, do whatever we want in this space. And I found out today that it's highly probable that I'll be able to do a deal with the church that owns this so that we can be assured that we can be in here till fall or maybe longer. And then it'll be a matter of putting a cover over this whole thing so that it's workable in the summertime. So anyway, I appreciate everybody for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Hopefully this was valuable.
The potential is limitless.
Cool.
Kind of blows my mind.
It wasn't until you started talking, I'm like, I know that voice. Why do I know that voice? Because every other Friday, I'm on the public policy committee.
Oh.
Tech Council.
What's your name?
Karen McBean, I'm the newest member.
Okay.
Right, so I go in and sit with Steve and Jason.
Right.
So yeah, and I'm there like, what are you doing here? And most people just call in.
Right. I'm sure not going to get my starting button down there at 8 a.m. on Friday morning.
I love
Do you have a
it.
card?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Are there meters for these things?
I have one in the car. I'm
This is a communications. I carry my wife's cards. Well, yeah, it's a great terrorist network.
Well,
And where?
Oh, okay.
Well,
that's
Yeah.
It looks
Great. I can't read it in this light, but that's.
I just want to make sure I understood that correctly.
I know the
Hey,
voice.
the voice,
I know
right.
the voice.
With,
I've listened to the voice.
yeah, you can track it. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, and it actually took me 20 hours to,